This video is about B.P. Nichol's sound poem, Love Just Wants to See You in the Nude with Trumpet Concerto. Now, I said that this is a sound poem, okay? So poetry can take any form it wants. Most of us know poems as words on the page, but poems are also performed. They come out of an oral tradition. It's the oldest form of literature, in fact, that we have. It comes out of song, comes out of, people remembering stuff because of the rhyme scheme. And so the auditory, the oral component, and the AU, oral component of the poem is important. And so this is a poem that focuses obviously on sound. Now, whether or not you liked this poem doesn't really matter to me. But no matter what you thought of it, you thought something of it. You maybe thought, oh, this is just garbage, or maybe it made you laugh, maybe it made you really uncomfortable. But I think for almost everybody I've ever played this for, it's undeniable that they have some kind of response to it, okay? And it's unusual in its, it's not just another poem, it's something different, okay? There's lots of these things out there. It's certainly by no means a unique phenomenon, but most people just don't spend their time listening to this kind of thing. So the reason why I put a poem like this in my course is that it's to get you to think about the limits of literature and the limits of language. That is, how do we make sense? How do we make meaning out of things? Is there any sense? Is there any meaning in this poem? Is it totally nonsensical? Is it totally meaningless? And I think that the obvious answer, no. I mean, we can be dismissive and say it's just garbage, right? But there's something else going on here, that there's letters, there's eventually words, there's sounds. Okay, so what's at the limits of our reading experience or our listening experience? Okay, that when we listen to an instrumental song, for example, there's no words, but we still derive pleasure from it, or whatever we do derive from instrumentals, and this is really just an instrumental poem, as it were. Okay, it's certainly angry at times, and it's got an emotional content to it, okay? But we're left struggling as listeners to try and make sense. And that's what I want you to take away from this poem, is that we don't always have to make sense of it. And it's to show up that predisposition we have as readers to try and make sense of the poem, when this poem might be making a different kind of sense, a sense that we're not used to understanding. Okay? Or maybe it's trying to be nonsensical, and we're forced to grapple with this idea that we can't make sense of it. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. I don't know. Okay? So there's lots to be said about this poem, and you can ask me about it if you want to hear more about this kind of stuff. I'm not going to dwell on it for a really long time, but just over the years, I've played this for different people and different responses. And one of the responses that I've always enjoyed or appreciated was, in fact, my mother's response to this. When I first heard this, I'm like, Mom, you gotta hear this. And I played it for her. And she said, well, that's just some guy screaming the alphabet. I could do that. And it was interesting to me, because my response to my mother at that time was, yeah, but you don't do that, right? We don't go around screaming letters of the alphabet, okay? So context becomes important here, that if I went downtown Red Deer at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning and started, performing this poem on a street corner, I'd probably get thrown in the drunk tank, okay? But if I bring it into a college or university classroom, it's suddenly art, okay? So what changes there, okay? What allows me to give you this poem and say, this is important art, okay? Versus, this guy should be locked up, okay? So we see lots of examples of this, in all sorts of experimental art, where people say, oh, this is just trash, it's garbage, it's just brush strokes on a painting, it's just someone making noise, it's just abstract art. Okay, sure, that's one response, but it gets us to probe the definitions of art. What makes something art? What makes something not art? What makes something worth our time and our effort and our understanding? And what makes something into something that we can just dismiss and say it's unimportant?